It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air feels fresh and carries the scent of distant rain, a promise of change. Margaret sat in her favorite garden chair, the one that had been passed down through the generations, the wood worn smooth from years of use. The sound of birds singing and the rustling of leaves filled the air. But her mind wasn't on nature. No, today, her thoughts were far from the peaceful tranquility that surrounded her. As she gazed out at the vibrant flowers in her garden, a voice familiar yet distant code in her mind. It was a voice she hadn't heard in decades, but one that had been with her since youth. A voice that once made her heart race. A voice that spoke words of love, and yet, betrayal. "Margaret," she whispered softly to herself, her fingers brushing the edges of her coffee cup. "How did I ever let it go so far?" The memories were still fresh, vivid like the colors of the flowers she stared at. She had been just a girl then, naive to the world and to love's complexity. The love she had once felt for Daniel had been innocent, pure even. But love, as she had learned, wasn't always kind. It could twist and turn into something unrecognizable, something that broke a heart and shattered a future. But there had been no answers, no closure. Just silence. Until now. The letter had come unexpectedly, buried under a pile of bills, addressed to her in a familiar, yet strange handwriting. Daniel's handwriting. She hadn't seen it in so long that at first, she thought she might have imagined it. Why now? She thought, gripping the edge of the chair tightly. Why, after all these years? The envelope, worn at the edges, felt heavy in her hands as she stared at it, her fingers trembling. She had long buried any thoughts of Daniel, had convinced herself that whatever had happened was part of the past. But now, here it was, dragging her back into a time she'd rather forget. In a moment of hesitation, she opened the letter. The paper felt smooth, almost too smooth, as if it had been carefully chosen for a reason. And as she read the words inside, her heart began to race. "I never stopped thinking about you. Margaret, I need to see you. There's something important you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago." Her breath caught in her throat. What could it possibly be? What was so important that after all these years, he would reach out to her now? As the words swirled in her mind, a memory from the past flashed before her eyes, saw an image of Daniel, smiling with that same mischievous glint in his eyes, telling her they'd be together forever. But forever hadn't happened, had it? The letter dropped from her hands, fluttering to the ground like a leaf caught in the wind. Margaret stared at it, her heart thumping louder than the distant sound of a train passing by. She had always wondered what had happened to Daniel. Where had he gone? Why had he left her with nothing but pain? Now, it seemed like the answers were about to unfold. But as she sat there, something in the pit of her stomach told her that this letter, this sudden appearance of Daniel after so many years, wasn't just about rekindling lost love. It was something darker, something far more dangerous. The meeting, Margaret hadn't expected to be so affected by the letter. After all these years, she had built walls around her heart, convinced herself that she had moved on, that life had carried her in a different direction. But the words in that letter had torn those walls down, brick by brick, leaving her exposed once more. The letter had arrived early in the week, and by Thursday, Margaret had made her decision. She had to know. She had to find out why Daniel had disappeared from her life, why he had left her with no explanation, no closure. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed the number that had been written at the bottom of the letter. It was just like Daniel to be cryptic. She expected nothing less. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Margaret." The voice was low, hesitant, but undeniably Daniel's. "Yes," she replied, her heart pounding. "It's me. You wanted to see me?" A long pause stretched between them, and for a moment, Margaret wasn't sure if he would respond. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you, Margaret. I've thought about you every day. I need to explain everything, but I can't do it over the phone. Please, meet me." She swallowed hard, a thousand questions flooding her mind. Why couldn't he tell her everything now? What could possibly be so urgent? She had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the years, but never had she expected it to feel so overwhelming. Where? she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old pier, he said, his tone soft but urgent. The one where we used to go. Tomorrow, at noon. Margaret felt her pulse quicken. The pier, it had been their place. Their secret haven, where they'd shared their dreams, their fears, their plans. How could he ask her to return there after everything that had happened? But despite the hesitation in her chest, there was something deeper, something that pulled her toward him, a gravity she couldn't escape. I'll be there, she said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. But you owe me the truth, Daniel. The line went silent for a moment. Before he spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. I will, Margaret, I swear it. And with that, the call ended. The next day, the sun hung high in the sky, the waves lapping against the sides of the pier as Margaret walked slowly toward the weathered wooden posts. She had worn a simple dress. Nothing fancy, but it felt like the most important outfit of her life. Her heart was heavy with anticipation, each step leading her closer to the truth. When she reached the end of the pier, she stood there for a long moment, staring out at the water, the same water they had once gazed at together. Planning for a future that never came, she closed her eyes, breathing in the salty air, trying to steady herself. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Her breath hitched, and she turned. There he was, Daniel. It felt like the years had melted away in an instant. His face had aged, his once boyish features, now tempered with time. But as eyes those familiar, dark eyes still held the same warmth, the same intensity that had once captured her heart. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, as if waiting for the other to say something, to break the silence that had hung between them for so long. Finally, Daniel took a step forward. Margaret, his voice was full of regret. I don't know where to begin. She crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. Start with the truth, Daniel. Start with why you left me. Part 3, The Unraveling Truth. Daniel's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it was as though time stood still. The years of silence, of unanswered questions, all seemed to hang between them like a heavy fog. Margaret's heart beat wildly in her chest, the air thick with anticipation and something else, something darker. He looked older, tired. The Daniel she remembered was full of life, quick with a joke and a smile. This man, standing before her now, was burdened with secrets she couldn't yet fathom. I didn't leave because I wanted to, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I left because I had no choice. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? You just disappeared. No note, no explanation. I had to pick up the pieces of my life, Daniel. I had to learn how to live without you. Her voice trembled, the pain of all those years without him spilling out in her words. I know, Daniel said, his gaze dropping to the ground, and I've regretted it every single day. But what I'm about to tell you, Margaret, it's not something I can take back. She took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat. Tell me then, please, what is it? I had to pick up the pieces of my life, Daniel. I had to learn how to live without you. Her voice trembled, the pain of all those years without him spilling out in her words. I know, Daniel said, his gaze dropping to the ground, and I've regretted it every single day. But what I'm about to tell you, Margaret, it's not something I can take back. She took a step forward, her breath catching in her throat. Tell me then, please. What is it? He exhaled sharply, as if trying to summon the strength to speak the words that had haunted him for so long. I was involved in something dangerous. And it wasn't just about me. It was about people I cared about, people who could get hurt. I had to disappear to protect them. To protect you. Margaret stared at him, struggling to process his words. Protect me from what? What could you possibly have gotten involved in that would have kept you away from me? Daniel looked out at the water, his expression distant, haunted. There were people after me, Margaret. People who would have hurt anyone close to me. And I couldn't bear to see you in danger. I thought I could keep you safe by staying away. The words felt like a punch to the gut. You thought you could keep me safe by abandoning me. By leaving me to wonder what happened to you. To think you didn't care. I was trying to protect you. Daniel snapped, his voice rising, his frustration evident. Do you think this was easy for me? I had to cut everyone off. I had to disappear. And it wasn't just about you, Margaret. There were things I couldn't explain, things I didn't understand myself. What kind of things, Daniel? You're still not telling me everything. He took a step closer to her, lowering his voice to a whisper. There are people who don't forget, people who will stop at nothing to get what they want. And I made a choice to protect you, even if it meant losing you forever. The silence between them stretched long, the weight of his words hanging over them like a storm waiting to break. Margaret could barely comprehend the gravity of what he was saying. You're saying you did all of this because of some dangerous people? She asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. And now you're back, telling me this like it's supposed to make sense? Daniel nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I never wanted to hurt you. But now they know I'm back. And they won't stop until they get what they want. A chill ran down Margaret's spine. What do they want, Daniel? He hesitated before speaking, his voice barely a whisper. Me and you, Margaret. They want both of us. Margaret's heart raced, her mind struggling to catch up with the gravity of what Daniel had just said. What do you mean, they want us? She asked, her voice tight with fear. She tried to process the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't. Daniel's eyes flickered toward the horizon, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and terror. I thought I could keep you safe, Margaret. I thought I could disappear, and that would be enough. But now they know I'm back. They're already looking for us. Margaret stepped back, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. She had always known Daniel had a past, a shadow that clung to him. But she had never imagined it would come to this. She had thought their love was something pure, something separate from the darkness of the world. But now, as the truth unraveled before her, she realized how wrong she had been. What do they want with us? She asked, her voice trembling. They want to use us, Daniel replied, his words heavy with dread. They think I have something they need, something valuable, and they won't stop until they get it. What could you possibly have that they want? What are you involved in, Daniel? I can't explain everything right now, but trust me when I say, I've spent years trying to distance myself from them. I thought I was free. But they never forget, and now they've found me again. Who are these people, Daniel? She asked. Who are you running from? They're part of something much bigger than you can imagine. A group that operates in the shadows underground, in places no one talks about. They're ruthless. They've been after me for years, and now they've set their sights on you too. What do we do? She whispered, her eyes searching his for answers. How do we get away from them? Daniel's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Margaret saw the true weight of what he had been carrying all these years. We can't hide forever, he said, his voice low but firm. They'll find us wherever we go. The only way to stop them is to face them. Face them? You mean, we have to fight them? Daniel nodded grimly. It's the only choice we have left. But Margaret, it's dangerous. It's not just about us anymore. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want, and I won't let them hurt you. Margaret felt a surge of emotion, fear, anger, confusion, but there was something else too. Something that stirred deep within her. A desire to understand, to uncover the truth. She had lived with the pain of not knowing for so long. And now, as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, she realized she couldn't turn away from it. Then tell me what we need to do, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Daniel took a long, measured breath, his eyes locking with hers. We need to find out what they want, and we need to stop them, before it's too late. The days that followed were a blur of fear and confusion. Daniel's presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like a weight pressing down on her every moment. They were no longer just two people trying to rekindle a lost love. They were players in a deadly game, one they hadn't signed up for, but one they couldn't escape. Margaret had spent sleepless nights wondering what was coming next. She had grown up in a quiet town, far removed from the kind of danger Daniel spoke of, but now, it was as if the shadows had followed them here. She could feel them lurking, waiting. The letter, the meeting, the revelations, it was all leading somewhere. But where? What was Daniel mixed up in? And what was it that these mysterious people wanted from him and her? They had decided to move quickly. Daniel had insisted they take a few precautions, but Margaret was still reluctant. She wasn't sure if she was ready to dive into the depths of his past, especially not with the threat of danger hanging over them. But she knew, deep down, there was no turning back now. "We need to go to the old warehouse," Daniel said one afternoon, his voice low but resolute. Margaret looked up at him, her brow furrowing. "The warehouse, why? What's there?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then met her gaze. "It's where it all started. The people who are after me, they think I hid something there. And if we're going to stop them, we need to find out what it is." The tension in the air thickened. Margaret didn't like the sound of it. A warehouse, hidden things, it all seemed like a trap, a setup she wasn't sure they could survive. "Isn't it dangerous?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "It is," Daniel admitted, his eyes darkening with regret. "But it's the only lead we have. They're watching us, Margaret. Every move we make. If we don't act fast, we'll lose our chance." Margaret nodded reluctantly. "Okay," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But we go together. No more secrets. Daniel, whatever this is, whatever happens next, need to know everything." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I promise you, no more secrets." Later that evening, as the shadows lengthened and the world outside seemed to grow darker, Daniel and Margaret made their way to the warehouse. It was tucked away in an industrial area, hidden from view by the high chain-link fence that surrounded it. The rusted metal gates loomed like the mouth of a cave, ready to swallow them whole. As they approached, Daniel's hand hovered near his jacket pocket, where he kept a gun, something he had always avoided showing her in the past. She hadn't wanted to know about the danger, but now, standing here with him, she realized it was too late to pretend. "Stay close," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "If anything goes wrong, you need to run. Get out of here, no matter what." Margaret nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. They were going to uncover whatever secret Daniel had been hiding all these years. But with each step she took toward the warehouse, she felt the weight of the danger pressing down on her. They were walking straight into the heart of something dark and twisted, and she wasn't sure either of them would make it out unscathed. They reached the door, and Daniel motioned for her to stay back as he tried the handle. It creaked open, revealing the dim interior. The smell of old wood and metal filled the air, the silence almost suffocating. Margaret could barely see in the darkness, but she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Keep your eyes open," Daniel whispered, his voice tense. They stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. The sound echoed in the empty space, and for a moment, Margaret felt like they had just sealed their fate. Then she heard it. A low, ominous sound coming from deeper within the warehouse. A scraping noise, followed by footsteps. Someone was here. The footsteps grew louder, drawing closer with each passing second. Margaret's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. As she clung to the edge of the darkness, trying to make sense of everything that had led her here, Daniel grabbed her arm gently, pulling her behind a stack of crates. "Stay quiet," he whispered urgently, his breath shallow. "We don't know who it is yet." Margaret nodded, her body tense. Every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. They stood in the shadows, the only sound the uneven beat of her heart and the slow, steady footfalls of whoever was walking through the warehouse. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. Margaret gasped as she saw the face wrecked, but twisted with malice. It was Andrew, the man she had once thought of as a friend. The man who had helped Daniel when everything had started going wrong. But now, his eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with a strange kind of triumph. "Daniel," Andrew said with a smile that sent chills down Margaret's spine. "I knew you couldn't stay away, and I knew you'd come back for it. You always were predictable." Daniel stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You don't have to do this, Andrew. It's over. Let it go." Andrew laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. "Over? It was never over, Daniel. You may have disappeared, but the game never stopped. You've always been one step behind, trying to run away from the mess you made. But you can't hide forever." Margaret's mind raced. The game? What game? Daniel's past, the secrets, everything he had kept from her. It was all starting to come together, but not in the way she had expected. What do you want, Andrew? Daniel's voice was steady, but Margaret could hear the underlying tension. You've had your revenge. You've won. Let us go. Andrew shook his head, a look of mock sympathy crossing his face. No, Daniel. I haven't won yet. There's still the matter of the key. The one thing you kept from me, the thing that could change everything. Margaret's confusion deepened. The key. What key was he talking about? Andrew turned his gaze to her, his eyes narrowing. And now, I'm going to make sure Margaret understands just how deep this goes. She's been in the dark long enough. It's time she knew what you really did. Daniel's face hardened, and he moved toward Andrew. But Margaret grabbed his arm. What is he talking about? What did you do, Daniel? Andrew stepped back, his smile widening. You still don't get it, do you, Margaret? Daniel didn't just disappear to protect you. He disappeared because of something far worse. The key, it's not just a piece of metal. It's a symbol, a connection to a network of people who want control, who want power, and Daniel had the power to give it to them.